Well, welcome back. It is Adrian and I.
Hello.
We're a day late, but it's all good. Man, it's been a week. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to just sitting down and just chatting.
I think that about sums it up. It's been a week.
It's been a week. Gosh. Lord, you stepping in anytime soon? Man. There's been a lot going on, even like just in culture, in the world this week, even.
Yeah. It's...
You've got what happened in Nashville, Trump being indicted. There's all kinds of crap.
A friend of mine and somebody I know they posted something on Instagram, and I thought it was so interesting, just this dialogue that happened. And what they posted was like concentric circles, like these little rings. And it was talking about the importance of prayer and love. And throughout, in this little diagram, it was just, together was written on these across these concentric circles at the top, at the bottom, left and right. And, there were the words in the circles like love, unity, and I think together or something like that. And somebody commented on his post. It was just an image. And they commented and they said something like, that's kind of tone deaf right now. And I'm like, and his response was, well, what do you mean? And I realized what was happening when he looked at it. It was a black background with white concentric circles. So I was reading the words and I hadn't seen it this way. But when you kind of step back and look at it, it kind of looks like a target, like a shooting target. So what the person was referring to is like, okay, we've had a lot of shootings often. And in fact, we just had this thing happen in Nashville. And this person was kind of commenting that it's tone deaf of you to use this image right now when this shooting just happened, this image that could look like a shooting target. Well, the person that posted it didn't intend.
Right.
They weren't thinking a shooting target. They were just talking about, concentric circles and how these things, these ideas and thoughts are interconnected. So I reached out to him and I said, I think this is what that person is seeing, but I know this is not what you intended. Mm. And I said, it's so sad that our world right now, we're looking through broken eyes. We're looking through broken lenses.
Yeah.
So even something that we don't intend to be tone deaf or insensitive, like we didn't even see that when we posted the thing. We may put something up and we're not seeing that thing. Our intent isn't to be insensitive or to be dismissive of something that's happened or something that's hurtful to someone. You post something innocently and actually with a good motive, trying to share good ideas. But because we're looking through broken lenses, somebody looked at it and said, that's tone deaf, that's insensitive. And it just got me to thinking, right now, how often are we seeing not just an Instagram post, but how often are we interpreting words that others are saying, posts that others are posting, others' actions? And how often are we misinterpreting those because of our brokenness?
Yeah.
Remember, I love that John Prine song where I think it's called Souvenirs, and there's that line that, man, from the first time I heard it, I loved it. He said, broken hearts and dirty windows make it difficult to see.
That's a great one. That's good. I love that.
And I thought, that's where we are. And he wrote that like a long time ago. And I thought, yeah, man, we've got a lot of broken hearts. There's a lot of broken lenses and broken windows.
Yeah.
And it's making it hard for us to see each other.
Tim Ross posted something yesterday or today about how seeing through offense is what will cause somebody to think that the other person's a problem. And he alluded to, well, if you're offended or your expectations were for somebody to do something, the problem isn't them. The problem is with you. Actually, what it was is he was talking about like trust. He was like, if you can't trust somebody, if you feel like in a relationship, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you feel like you can't trust that person because of something they said or something they did, the problem isn't the other person. The problem
That's
is...
a crack in your lens because now if if I don't have that fundamental trust, if I don't trust you,
Yeah.
then that is going to color or taint or affect everything I hear from you.
Yeah.
If I trust and know you and believe that you care about me and that you want the best for me, that's going to affect everything. That's going to affect how I perceive everything you say to me.
It's true.
Funny, my brain. When you said when we look through a fence,
A
I literally
fence?
thought you were talking. I thought you were so I'm picturing. I'm like, where's Alex going with this?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you're looking through? You see the wires, or what are you talking about?
Popping over. Hey, neighbor. So you don't got any pants on? You may want to put some pants on.
It's like, what are you doing looking through that fence?
You pervert, get out of
Yeah,
here.
I know, right?
You know, yesterday I met up with my mentee, and it was my first time hanging out with him by like ourselves, and I had to pick him up from the county jail, et cetera. And we were talking about a lot of my conversation with him was, where do you see yourself going in the next like 5 years? And he's 17 years old. He should be out of jail in the next like couple of months. He turns 18 in August. And so, what I was trying to really encourage him in is, now that you're stepping out, you have a clear and clean opportunity to change the trajectory of your life moving forward. And so that requires you to be very thoughtful in who you have in your life, the relationships that you have. And then as we talk through things, there's a lot of growth that needs to happen in his life, just on those few topics that we talked about. But I asked him, like, hey, now that he became a Christian, he's given his life over to Christ. I asked him, what do you think has changed for you now that you've become a believer, compared to when you walked in the doors of this juvenile center to where you're at now, a year and a couple of months later? And he was like, well, I read the Bible, and he just really started to kind of break down that he's committing time to prayer, right? And so I was like, well, how does that affect your life moving forward? Like, how do you see people? How do you see your past? How do you see moving on from this current stage of life? And his response was very much like a 17-year-old, right? Which was like, yeah, well, I'm gonna go back, and I'm still gonna kick it with the homies and the homies that got me in trouble, but I'm not gonna do anything, and I'm gonna, I'm going to protect them. And he started repeating some of the same behaviors that got him into trouble. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, hold up. I think there's a lot here that we can talk about, because there's a direction that you feel like you want to go, which is part of your past, which is looking through the lens of offense. Mm-hmm. He was talking about how, okay, if he goes back in one group, there's always going to be temptation. There's always going to be some type of like group of people that want, in the way that we talked about it, was like, the gangster term of like, they want to bang on them. Yeah. And so before we ended our time together, I had gone through closing out Micah, and in Micah 6:8, I just said, hey, I want you to read this. I didn't read it to him, but I said, I want you to go back to your room today. I want you to read it. And I said, next week, let's talk about this, because I think this is going to change the way that you look at life moving forward, which is Micah 6:8, human. I love this. It's in the ERV version. Human, the Lord has told you what goodness is. This is what he wants from you. Be fair to other people. Love kindness and loyalty, and humbly obey your God. And so I left it at that. I was like, just go read that, and let's talk about it next week. But as I think about offense, as I think about what Tim Ross said, what you just talked about, I think so many people are they cling on so heavy to the things of the past and hurt and pain, that they can't live out a life that is free from those things. And I love that you said the dirty windows. Like, it's clogging up their vision, right? And I think this scripture kind of paints that picture of what, freedom looks like, and what stepping out of that looks like, because what this does is it requires you to give up that offense and to love people well.
Those habits, I don't remember if we talked about this last time. I've talked about this a couple of times over the last week, but I don't know if we touched on it. Did we talk about the pants, putting on their pants?
No.
Okay. So I thought about this, how sometimes that lens that we're looking through is the only lens we know. I think we look at life through the lens of our experience. Mm-hmm. What we've experienced is what's kind of conditioned us to know how to look at things. And sometimes that experience is broken. So sometimes you see things and you're seeing a threat, or you're seeing rejection, or you're seeing, negative things when they're not there, because somewhere in your past you experienced negative things. What happens though is even when you have a redemptive experience, like you're talking about, he had this lifestyle before that was very unhealthy, that got him to where he is in jail now. Yeah. So he finds Jesus, he comes to know a Savior. And we've said this before. It's like, well, Jesus is in your heart, but your grandpa's in your bones. Like we still got the flesh. So the thing that I was thinking about is a lot of times it's those old habits. It's the old. We're so used to behaving a certain way and thinking a certain way and seeing the world a certain way that even when Jesus shows us a different way, that other stuff is so in our bones. It's so in our behavioral patterns. We're so accustomed to it. It feels so familiar that when we try to do something different, it feels strange. Mm. And the example that I thought of is, okay, like when you put your pants on this morning, which leg do you put in first? Just okay.
Never had to think about this. My right.
You're right. So tomorrow, I want you to put the left in first.
I can already feel the tension thinking about that.
Or a more obvious example. Which hand do you use to brush your teeth?
On my right.
So tomorrow morning when you get up, use your left hand.
Okay.
You can still brush your teeth.
Right.
How's that going to feel?
I'm going to have toothpaste all over my face. It's true. I understand where you're going.
It just feels weird. It feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward. And I think that's how these life changes are sometimes. Mm. Like Jesus has shown us a better way, but it feels so unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And this other way is not better, but it's like, no, but I always use my right hand this just feels natural.
Right.
This is a part of this is the way I do things. I put my right leg in first. I put my right shoe on first. And if I do something different, there's like this tension somewhere in us that is almost saying something's wrong. Something feels off.
Yeah.
Go back to do it the other way. So in his situation, maybe he comes out and he's trying to live his life different. And he's trying to make different choices. And he's trying to have different friends, and he's trying to look at the world differently and live his life in a completely different way.
Yeah.
There's going to be this every step. This feels different.
Yeah.
This feels weird. And that can feel like friction sometimes. So it takes more work to create those new patterns. And the whole time, some part of us, I think, I know for me anyway, some part of me is saying, it'd be so much easier if I just went back and did it that way. Because I know how that feels. And I know what that looks like. I know what that feels like. That just feels so, that's me. I know that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times that's what prevents us from changing is we forego the good and instead choose the familiar.
Yeah. I had literally that thought yesterday as I was driving home from the baseball game with the kids. I was thinking it is so much easier to not change. Like, why does
not
change...
better.
Not better, but why is change so freaking hard? Well, it's that. It's the behaviors. It's changing your perspective, the lens that you're looking through, your behaviors. And it's uncomfortable because you've done things differently for so long that there's tension when you want to. I think of Jonah. Mm-hmm. Like he got so pissed off that God wanted to love people, and I resonate with that. I'm like, why are you going to let these people like, you know, get off
They
free?
don't deserve your redemption.
Yeah,
They don't deserve your mercy. They don't deserve to be blessed by you.
yeah. I'm like, bless me. I've been the one, you know, and I thought about this even yesterday too. You know, I had a moment with God, and I was complaining, and I was being a brat, you know, and I thought that, and I'm like, man, I've done so many things. I've served. I've, gone out of my way to do things for people and intentionally done it, not for like reward, right?
Oh, put a pin in that. There's something I want. Serving. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but I keep coming back to the idea that God doesn't want us to stay in the same place that we're in, because if we're in the same place that we're in, we're not growing, we're not learning, we're not developing, we're not becoming an image of Him. And so yeah. That, I mean, it's very true. There's a lot of tension in change. What were you going to say?
Well, that tension, it feels like there's friction.
Yeah.
There's friction, like, there's friction that we're uncomfortable with. And until you create those new patterns, it's almost like sometimes when you're driving down an old dirt road and there's a rut in the road, and the tires just kind of fall in.
Yeah.
And when you try to drive sideways, like, out of the groove,
Yep.
you drive there, but like the tires just want to fall back in that groove. This is bumpy. The road's bumpy over here. The dirt, there's still bumps. It hasn't been worn in.
Yeah.
So it's bumpy. It's more uncomfortable. It's more, unstable. But that groove where those tracks where they were, driven on for a long time. Oh, that's smooth. That's smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Not better, but smooth.
Yeah.
So it's like this friction. No, what I wanted to put a pin in, or what I was commenting on, it was, you said like I've served and serving. And I was having this discussion with Darren this week, and I couldn't remember the quote, and it had to do with serving and recognition. And it was a quote. It's a book called The Life You've Always Wanted by John Ortberg. And I read this years and years and years ago, and it was so convicting to me. And he's talking about following the practice of Jesus in how we serve. And he's actually quoting Richard Foster, who is a member of this organization called Renovare, which has to do with the spirit of the disciplines and really, really good, really powerful, deep stuff. And he's quoting Foster, and he says, more than any other single way the grace of humility is worked into our lives is through the discipline of service. Nothing disciplines the inordinate desires of the flesh like service, and nothing transforms the desires of the flesh like serving in hiddenness. The flesh whines against service, but it screams against hidden service. It strains and pulls for honor and recognition. The flesh whines against service, but it screams against hidden service. When we're doing something, when we're serving in obscurity, when nobody notices, there's a part of our flesh that's like, hey, look what I'm doing. Nobody's recognizing. I'm doing all this stuff and nobody's noticing. Nobody's praising me. Nobody's telling me how good I am for the stuff I'm doing. Nobody's giving me credit, for everything I've done. And already I love that there's those two distinctions. Like sometimes serving, we have these thoughts of, why am I even doing this? Like, and that's when people notice. When you serve in a way that nobody notices. These internal dialogues are like, if everybody knew everything I do all the time, and I do this and this and this, it's like, that's not why we serve. It's
Totally. Yeah.
I remember
recognition.
I remember reading it then and being so convicted. And one of the people that told me about that book was we ran sound before I ever did anything in worship or served in ministry. One of the first ways that I served in ministry was in the sound booth, running sound at the back of the church where, it's one of the most
unseen places,
challenging places that only gets noticed when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And we got to serve with a couple, with Rodney and Carol Dixon, and they were amazing because Rodney was all about serving in obscurity. In fact, he recommended a book to me called Serving in Obscurity.
Oh.
And never looked for the limelight, never wanted credit, he just wanted to serve.
Yeah.
And didn't want to get noticed or recognized for it. Rodney, I remember, man, God used them to show us so much stuff. Like, they modeled serving for us. But I'll remember they were trying to pay him for serving. They're like, hey, you're doing this. You're the first one here. You're the last one to leave. You're always setting things up. You're doing things for events. So we want to give you a stipend. We want to pay you. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. No, we insist. So they insisted on paying him, at which point he just used that money to buy gear for the church.
Smart.
He's like,
way to go, dude.
You can give me what you want.
Love that.
It's just going to come back. And he didn't tell anybody that. I would watch it happen. And I thought, man, I want to be like that when I grow up.
Right. Yeah. I as you're talking about that, I thought about David Cherry. Like, he has been that for me. Like, he never was in the limelight. He had such a heart to serve people, servant's heart. And he intentionally cared for his team. Like, week in and week out, he was always there, and always working hard to make sure that there was excellence in the tech team and the audio team. And I loved it. Like, he was so willing to make the time to coach and mentor people, to now where he's leading a church, and it's incredible. And they, like, seeing them, I haven't been to his church yet and I want to, but like, seeing him do that just aligns fully with where his heart was at that whole entire time. To now be on a pedestal of some, or like the stage,
To have a platform.
yeah. And to not change. Like, I haven't seen a difference in him. And I love that. It keeps me accountable. And it gets me excited for the potential that we can have individually by watching people like that.
He was inspiring to me too, because when I first started running sound, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I remember Rodney and me somehow found out about these free classes that David was hosting out at Shoreline. He saw a need. He saw, like, okay, you have a lot of volunteer people volunteering to run sound at churches, and David, out of the goodness of his heart and with a compassion for those that would be listening.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to spare everybody that's going to be in these churches. Let me help these folks. Yeah. You have a group of people that want to serve in that ministry, but that are unequipped. And he put the call out, and he let people know, hey, we're doing this. Every so often, just come and we'll show you how to do it. And I never forget, I think when we went, one of the times we went, they were doing it in, I think there was like a youth facility. And he had like 3 or 4 tables set up. And each table had, the first table had like the simplest possible sound system you could ever have. It's like maybe like 1 mic and 2 speakers and not even a mixer. And the next one was like, okay, now you have a mic and a mixer and speak. And each table got increasingly more complex.
Yeah.
And him just taking the time to walk all of us. And he put the call out, like, anybody that wants to come, we'll show you. And I remember thinking, here you're I don't know, what was he what was his title over there?
He was like director of tech or something like that.
Yeah, he's got this title, and he's doing this at a really big church with a really complex system. But he's willing to take the time, and I remember asking questions, and he took the time to answer simple, dumb questions.
Yeah.
And again, he embodied, the thing we always talk about is making people feel safe, seen, and loved.
He did.
He did that. I still remember how it felt to be in that room, to not know anything, to feel like a complete noob. Mm. And he's like, here, let me show you. Yeah. No, here's what this does, and explaining it.
I think I was there.
Were you?
Yeah. It was in the small chapel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was there. Yeah, I mean that's why I dropped out of college was because I was learning more from him than I was in school, which is wild. I remember just sitting there and I'm like, and the school that I went to had an amazing, like it had the SSL board, top notch, it was so cool. But everything that I know about audio is from him. It's wild.
His willingness to share.
Yeah.
Like even in that, like above and beyond, way beyond any of the knowledge and the tech knowledge. I think the thing that impacted me the most is him modeling serving.
Yeah. Yes.
Seeing that.
Yeah.
Like, and that affects you, that changes you when you're around someone who's modeling those things. You learn it not because you've been told or because you've read it, but you learn it like what is that saying? It's caught, not taught. You learn it from being around it and seeing it.
Yeah, I love that. Man, that brings back so many memories. Being at Shoreline. That was fun. Yeah, now I want to go visit David. I haven't gone to his church. I've watched some of his stuff on Facebook when he posts stuff.
Well, years later, after that was like, man, almost 20 years ago when I first went to that thing. Years later, I'd already been serving at church. I'd gone on, and it was years and years later. I remember for some reason, I was thinking about him, and I just reached out and said, "Hey, David, would you like to go to lunch?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." Even years later, I give him a call, and at a moment's notice, he made the time. And we just sat and talked over at lunch. And I remember we went to, Roaring Fork over on Stone Lake.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that place.
And we just sat there and we just talked. And that to me was so impactful and important to me that I just reached out. He's like, "Yeah, sure." And he was busy at the time. I mean, he's always been busy. He's always had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But he took the time. He made the time. Said, "I'm going to go sit." And there was nothing for him to get out of it other than spending time with somebody.
No. I need to call him. I need to reach out to him. That'd be cool to have him on here. Because I love his testimony. And I think it'd be super impactful. Because I think, sidebar conversation, but like I look at yours and Paula's marriage and I see a lot of strength. And I know it didn't come with a lot of easy moments. And with David's story too, with him and Lynn, there's been a lot of conflict and there's been things that they've gone through and have gotten past. And there's just a lot of beauty in that restoration. I'd love to have those stories be told on here if we can.
Paula, I don't know where she heard this, but she's been saying this more frequently lately, that our greatest pain is often the source of our greatest ministry.
I have to let that settle for just a second. Our greatest pain is often the greatest source of our ministry.
Our greatest pain is often the source of our greatest ministry. It's what enables. It's that most difficult thing that we went through that becomes the very thing that God uses us to minister to.
I have to sit on that one. That's good. Well, I'm reflecting on my past, and I'm like, ugh. But I know there's something there. Yeah, that's impactful. That was so much wisdom.
Yeah, one of the things, we've talked about this before, we're drawn to people now like we never have been in our lives. We are, both of us, we've always been pretty shy and introverted and closed off. That's, I mean, we've been married almost 24 years now, but for the majority of that time, not very social, not very outgoing. In the last several years, like, we're drawn to people. And I think what's happened is it's kind of that greatest pain thing. I think for a long time there were instances where one or both of us felt, well, I'll speak for me, I won't speak for Paula, felt overlooked or dismissed or felt like we were on the outside. And what that fed was, one, it drew me to a point where I had to work on my relationship with God, because that's the most important thing.
Right.
If I'm okay with him, then everything else is fine.
Yeah.
That'll put everything else in the appropriate perspective. At the same time, when we were running sound, when I'm sitting in the back of a church for 3 years, you observe things. Mm-hmm. You observe some human dynamics, some social dynamics.
Yes.
And it's tough, but you notice things. You go into a church, you notice who gets noticed.
Oh, yeah.
You noticed who gets embraced. You noticed the people that don't get embraced. You notice the people that get the soft rejection, hard rejections. You notice those that come in and it's very easy for them.
Yeah.
They walk in and there's something about their appearance, their station in life, their charisma, their personality, their something. Mm-hmm. They walk in and it's like, man, people just flock to them. They're like, and sitting in the back, you see these dynamics. And then you see the quiet, shy people, or you see the people that are not as socially comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think while we were watching that, we came to see, like, some folks, man, I think we just need to do better as a society, and I'll say as a church. We just see through some folks. There's some folks that walk into our churches that they may as well be invisible. And that's a hard statement, but it's true.
Right.
God help you if you walk into a vibrant, growing church and you're over 60. You're not part of that target growth demographic. And here's the thing that I guess one of the things that God's put on our heart, and it's not just age. Sometimes it'll be culture. Sometimes it'll be station of life. Sometimes it'll be affluency, or sometimes it'll be, oh, this is a really charismatic, outgoing, extroverted person. It'll be different things, but people we overlook others for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And I've been on that end of it. So from the time that we came here and were a part of this launch, one of the things that God impressed on my heart and Paula's heart, we don't want a single person that comes into our church to feel unseen. Not a single person.
100%. That is happening. Because I'll go back to Lexi coming in for the first time.
Oh,
and her first response was, I have never been hugged and loved on by so many people. And I think she looked to me to say, or to like, for me to be like, oh yeah, that's just, it's an act. But my automatic response was like, well, that's intentional. That is like, they actually are excited to see you. And it's not because of you're a newcomer. They genuinely care. And it's being seen in the everyday interaction.
If she comes in 6 months from now,
mm-hmm. She'll get the same thing.
And I think one of the things that sometimes we do as churches is somebody new comes in. Mm-hmm. I've experienced this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, you get all that attention, you get all that love when you're new because, hey, we're growing our numbers.
Mm-hmm. Hey, plug into this group, go to this group, go to this group. Yeah.
6 months from now, or a year from now, when you haven't been coming for 3-4 weeks or a year, mm-hmm. you hear a conversation like, hey, whatever happened to that person?
Yep.
And that's kind of a hard thing that we don't talk about much, but it is something, make no doubt. I mean, make no mistake. It's a dynamic that's there. Now, the challenge is one individual can't do all that. And you never want to fall into that, oh, it's the savior complex of, I need to go do that. No. The thing is, how do you establish a culture where everyone is trying to see everyone else? And I truly feel that if we're all listening to the leading of the Holy Spirit and we're all sensitive to his leading, everyone will get seen.
It's true.
Because I'll tell you, when she came, I saw her when she walked in. I went and gave her a hug and welcomed her. And because she came in early. Mm-hmm. But the thing that made an impression to me that I loved, I'm up there leading worship and I look over to the left and there was a moment where we were praying, where Darren asked us to break into small groups and pray for each other and with each other. And there's these little circles of 3, 4, 5 people. And I look over to the left and I see Terry and I see Micah and I see Lexi and I see Briley. Mm-hmm. What's Briley, 7? 8? Wait, she turned 8, right?
On Monday.
And I see them huddled with their arms around each other, praying for each other. And that to me was, Darren quotes Pastor Bill Hart often. He says, love. He said, Pastor Bill Hart would say, love looks like something. That's what love looks like.
Yeah.
That looks like love to me.
Yeah.
To see them embracing. So in my journey, having been from a position of feeling overlooked or always on the outside or the outskirts, that was a source of great pain for me.
Sure.
But it shaped me or shaped my character in such a way that I never want anyone to feel that. And that's absolutely affected how I see others.
Sure.
And there was a friend that I served with at Lake Travis, Fred Thomas. I remember we were sitting over there and we were talking one time and we were talking about this stuff, when people come in. And I truly believe that when a person comes into a church, regardless of their temperament and how they look, some part of them is looking for community or connection.
Yeah.
I think here's the where it gets a little more nuanced and it's not always simple, is sometimes we walk into a church and we got baggage and we got attitude and we're sizing it up and how good's the music and how good's the lighting and how friendly are the people and who came and said hi to me, who didn't say hi to me, how we come in with a chip on our shoulder. We come in with baggage.
Yeah.
But if we came in, some part of me wants community. And I used to love the way that Fred Thomas put it. He said he thought churches can be like a burn unit in the hospital. People come in wounded, and we have to be careful because sometimes our first inclination is to hug and embrace that person that's coming in. What does an embrace feel like if you've got burn wounds?
That's a good one. Yeah.
How does
it's not welcomed?
It's painful.
Mm-hmm.
So, on our end, I think we should be aware of everyone that's coming in, but Jesus is never invasive. Mm. The Holy Spirit's not going to be invasive. Yeah. We need to be sensitive and listen and be wise about how we love people. And sometimes that means just saying hi to someone and just doing a soft touch, like, hey, how's it going this morning? And kind of gauging, are they okay? Do they look a little uncomfortable? And then it's like, okay, but I saw them.
Yeah.
I affirmed them. I was present with them.
Earl McClendon, are you familiar with him? Mm-hmm. So he was the youth pastor for Shoreline for years, and I was doing audio. I was like the main audio engineer for the the young adults group service on Sunday nights. And every Sunday night after service, we would go as a church to a restaurant, and Earl would always come with his wife and sit with everybody and just love on people. And what I loved about that was it wasn't an act of let's go so that we can get more people to come. It was an intentional opportunity for him and his wife to build community with these young people that were not just going to the service, but that were looking to build community, in this church. And I really loved the way that they always showed up. And it was never like I don't know, it just didn't feel like an act. It felt intentional. And if there was ever a moment where someone was like kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, they didn't try to push it. They just loved on them. And that was an active way of them trying to do it well. And I, looking back at that, I don't see any, I never heard anything negative coming from those moments, but I love the way that they would intentionally do that. And it doesn't need to look like the way we're talking about, where someone comes in and you're automatically trying to include them and embrace them. It can be in many different forms and fashion of building community with these people, whether they're new or old.
Yeah, it's not a formula.
No.
And I think often, we're looking for formulas. It's like, oh, I did this and that worked. All right, let's write that down and share it with everybody else so they can do it too. Yeah. Now, I think it is important and it is empowering to share things that work well.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to listen to the leading of the Holy Spirit, because then there's not going to be a shortage of ideas of how do we love people.
Yeah.
And again, I've said it before, but if you want to know how to love people, read the love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. Like, it's pretty plain.
Yeah.
I mean, it lays it out. Loving people, it looks different. Sometimes it depends on the people, depends on the situation. What does it look like? Sometimes it's a hug. Sometimes it's hi. Sometimes it's a text. Sometimes it's sitting and listening over coffee or a lunch or something. It can be so many different things. And I think people respond to being loved on. And I think they absolutely respond when we're loving them, because we're feeling the Holy Spirit leading us to do that. We went to, I thought this was interesting. This is it's so fun to do. We just feel led to do it. So we try to make it a point to know the names of anybody serving us. Anytime we go into any restaurant, every time we go to, this morning, me and Paula went, and I'm like sharing, like, this is her name, this is his name, this is his name. This morning I went to PB and I'm walking in, and Matthew, the manager, he walks up to me. He's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" He started telling me, it's like, "Oh yeah, we lost our power yesterday." We just started having this conversation. And that's because at some point I asked him his name and we talked. But earlier this week we went to dinner with a friend, and we're at dinner and we go to this nice Italian place, and I don't know, maybe it's me, but sometimes when we go into nicer places, sometimes the wait staff can look a little snooty.
Sure.
Every now and then.
Yeah.
Not always, but every now and then they're kind of, and we went in and, I see our waitress, and she looked a little bit snooty, and I didn't know. I'm like, okay, I'm all right. So we sit down, and as soon as we sit down, I'm like, "Hey, how's your day going?" And her countenance, like, first it was like a question mark, like, why would you care? And then my next question was, "Well, what's your name?" She goes, "My name's Devin." I've never known anyone named Devin. I've heard the name, never met anyone named Devin. So my response immediately was like, "Well, that's interesting. You're the first Devin I've ever met." Her countenance immediately changed.
Yeah.
And it's like, it softened, and she was smiling. Like, the rest of the time she'd come and wait on our table.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't go in there with a game plan. I didn't have like this, oh, here's a technique, do this. No, we just walked in, and I'm like, I was just curious.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when you just see people, like, you genuinely just see them. It's amazing what happens.
I don't know where I heard this week. Someone had told me this, or I saw it somewhere, but the best way around a fence is to stay curious.
Again, you realize I'm just hearing a fence.
Yeah. Is it my accent, the way I'm saying it? A fence.
No, you're saying it right.
Okay,
I'm being dumb. It's to stay curious, yeah.
Yeah, I think about, we've talked about this so much. There's been moments where, like, I'm reading scripture and I have a revelation and I'm like, oh, I have to go tell so-and-so. And you are like, hold up.
I remember.
That's a word for you. It's not a word for anybody else. Yeah, that just made me think about that.
I shared that again with Darren this week.
Oh, did you?
We were having a conversation, and we were talking about, I was sharing something about how a couple of years ago, I stopped asking God to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I remember praying, God speak, God speak. And my prayer became, God help me to hear. Because I think you're speaking all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think the problem's on your end.
Yep.
Help me to hear. So now my prayer is, Lord, help me to hear. Help me to hear your voice. Help me to know your heart. Help me to recognize when you're moving, when you're doing things. And what I found since I started praying that is I just have these realizations all the time. Whether I'm reading a book, whether I'm watching a movie, whether I'm reading the Bible, whether I'm in prayer, whether I'm singing a worship song, whether I'm talking with you or a friend, these things just jump out.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend last year, and he was going through a struggle. He was in a relationship, and it was this really difficult relationship that they were going through. And I remember both of them were really struggling. And he said something, and even in that moment, in that broken situation, in that broken relationship, I felt like God was allowing me to take note. I think God wanted me to notice something. And what the guy said, what my friend said was, he said, we're just two broken people trying to love each other the best way we can.
Ooh, there's a lot of power in that.
And in that moment, as gut-wrenching as it was to hear, it felt like God saying, I want you to remember this and make note of this. That often, you, my children, are just broken people trying to love each other the best you can. And when you do it without me, you make a mess.
Gosh.
That's why you need me.
Yes.
And that was like, I felt like that was God speaking through someone's broken situation.
Yeah.
But then back to the thing you were mentioning. So like you start hearing and seeing these things and noticing. And I don't know, anytime I learn something, I immediately want to share it with somebody else. I get excited.
Me too.
So you start sharing. It's like, you tell somebody. It's like, oh man, this is so exciting. It's like, yes. Did you know this? Did you realize this? You read something in the Word and you go and you tell people. Well, one, and I get this and I'm working on it. That could be annoying as hell. When somebody's always like, oh, I just noticed this. I know. When you're always like you overwhelm people with stuff.
Yeah.
Two, the thing that we talked about, a lot of those things, God's like, hold on. That was just for you.
Yeah.
I didn't give you that to go preach a sermon or share it or go show other people. No, I want you to sit with this.
Yeah.
I wanted to share this with you. This is like a private conversation that I wanted to have with you. I wanted to share a part of my heart with you to help you grow. This is a personal thing.
I think about there was a moment probably about last year. I had the kids with me by myself, and I was driving to go take them somewhere. I don't know. We were going somewhere, and there was a homeless person on the side, and I happened to have cash in that moment. And so, I rolled the window down and, I gave the cash and told the person some things, and then that was it. As we're leaving, the kids were like, "Whoa, you had cash! Like, that's amazing!" And when we got to our destination, we were meeting up with, I don't know, maybe friends or family, and automatically Briley was like, "Daddy gave money to a homeless person," and I was like, "Briley, you don't need to tell everybody." And she was like, "Why? Why don't you do that? You just did something really nice for somebody." And I came back to, and I don't know where it's at in scripture, but doing it without show.
Yeah.
I'll have to go look at it. And
When you're recognized, you get that praise. You've gotten your reward here. It's like,
yeah. And this is kind of like the little moment that you're talking about in terms of like wanting to tell people. Like I can see the excitement in her because she's like, oh, this is a cool thing. But it was a moment for her and the kids to see on what it looks like to serve people and not try to get any recognition. And in that moment, I wasn't even really thinking about that specifically. But then when she started talking about it, then I'm like, that popped in my head and I'm like, okay, here's a moment for teaching. But as I reflect on that, that's very much what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity for them that God was showing them through just a simple thing. I just happen to have, and I never carry cash. Like it's a rare occasion when I have cash on me, like very, very rare. And for them to have that moment was pretty cool.
yeah,
Right.
and to see it.
Yeah. And it's not meant to go yelling at the top of a mountain, I gave money to a homeless person, Yeah. This conversation is kind of nostalgic to me for some reason. Like talking about like audio and David and some of the conversations we've had.
Speaking of David and the nostalgic part, I wonder if any of the folks listening actually went and reached out to people.
Oh,
Remember that
yeah.
at first
The call to action?
the call to action thing?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, reach out to somebody that wouldn't expect you to.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about that before too, like making a list of the people that God has used in your life that have been instrumental.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because David has been that for you.
Yeah.
He's been that for me too.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find really beautiful is I don't even think he knows the impact he had on me by doing that.
Yeah. Maybe not even me either. Because it's been years since I've like sat down and talked to him.
That makes me want to reach out to my friend Rodney and his wife Carol. They moved to Michigan now, but they were the ones that we served with when we first started serving in sound. Yeah. He was running sound, and his wife was running Carol. She was running lyrics. So that's when Paula and I we started serving together. I started serving on sound. She started serving on lyrics, and we got to watch and shadow them. But just the way that they did things had such an impact. They didn't tell us, do this. They showed us. Like they actually did it. And I don't think I've ever like reached out to Rodney and said that.
I wonder how that conversation, I would love to hear it.
He'll try to shut me up real quick. He'll be like, no, because he's uncomfortable with recognition.
All right, I'm just going to say, as extroverted as I am, and can sometimes be narcissistic in my behavior, and I'm not mean like I'm not a narcissist, but we have a flesh. Mm-hmm. I don't like being recognized. Weirdly, I may want it, but when it happens, it makes me so freaking uncomfortable. I don't know why. Because it's an opposition of what I want, weirdly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when it does happen, it's like, like the hair. I don't have hair on my back, but what's there, the peach fuzz, just rises. It's weird. Well, let me take that back. If it's in a public setting, if it's one-on-one, different.
Yeah.
Then I take it with like appreciation. But if it's like publicly, someone announcing something, I want to run. I don't know what that is.
I've started to just redirect, because Paula, we don't know how yeah.
What do I do with my hands?
We start glitching. It's like our brain starts glitching, and we don't.
Ricky Bobby moment.
Yeah, it feels so weird. Just like you hear the record scratch and the gears grinding in our head. Just, this is so awkward. So I've seen Paula and me, we'll try to redirect the conversation in a different way. But then also you never want to disrespect or dishonor,
Yeah.
you know, them trying to be supportive or encouraging. And I've made that mistake before. It's like someone really, they have something really heartfelt and they want to say, you've done this or thank you for this. And you're dismissive of it. And in their heart, like their heart was full and they wanted to share that with you. And when you dismiss it, it's like, it kind of deflates. So it's interesting to find this place of, well, thank you. You know, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
You made it look up.
So have you had that barbecue from?
I know,
Wild
right?
Barbecue?
You got to find something else
Yeah.
really quick.
Thanks. But guess what? Yeah, I've never done that. I don't think I've ever like tried to sway the conversation in my discomfort. That's a good thing. I might start doing that. And I say that like if I get praised every day. I don't, but
I mean, it's kind of the equivalent of you're in a conversation, somebody brings up a topic that you don't want to deal with, and it's the equivalent of going, "Look, it's Elvis."
yeah.
You just kind of,
Where did Adrian go?
yeah, what happened?
He was just here.
You just steer it away. But I've noticed, yeah, like people that I love and respect, that's kind of what they do. There's some people that just they accept compliments very, very gracefully. They see you, they accept it, and then they find a way. You know, they become skilled in navigating the conversation, you know, a different way.
I think my ploy is take it with Thanksgiving and then do an Irish goodbye.
Yeah.
Where'd he go?
I saw a puff of smoke and he was gone. I don't know what happened.
Wait a minute. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like this conversation, I feel like God is always just answers in this way every single time. Like me being a brat yesterday and going through my moment with him, questioning, asking why, this and that. And then having this conversation and hear him play out his response. And I love that he does that because like I was expecting of it. I think a lot of times we like, what I'm trying to get at is we'll be in moments where we're going through struggle. Like right now, I don't love my season, but it is what it is. And I've been playing in my head, just trying to serve people, you know, because that's what we've been preaching this whole entire time, right, for the past few weeks. And but in that weakness of like wanting things to change overnight and wanting him to respond right there and then, we always want it in a certain way. We always want him to do it in the way that we want him to do it, and he doesn't. And when he does respond, it's always much deeper than we anticipate. And he did that today through this conversation. Like it's pretty spot on with my argument with him yesterday. And I'm thankful for that.
Well, you know that song we were listening to earlier?
That's what I was thinking about. Exactly.
By the late Roby Duke. He's right on time. He may not come when we want, but he's right on time.
Yeah.
That was, every time I've listened to it, it's like, oh man, he's on time. It's our schedule that's jacked up, not his.
Yeah, it's our expectations, our desires. Even though they could be good, they can align very well with him in his heart. But that doesn't mean that it means yes now. Because one of the things that I've been hearing play out in my mind is I keep feeling and hearing no right now. And I'm like, well, if you just give me this and this will make life so much easier. And if you just do this and do that. No.
Did you hear that Tim Ross clip about, he was interviewing another pastor. I think who was also at Gateway. or a former, I think he was a former pastor. They were talking about how in their youth, there were moments where they felt like, I'm ready. I'm ready to preach that sermon. I'm ready to do that thing. I'm ready to lead that ministry. I'm ready to start that church. I'm ready. God put me in. I'm ready to do this. And they're like, we were so stupid. We weren't ready. He goes, we felt ready. He goes, you know when we were ready? When we felt like we weren't. When God was calling us to do something, it's like, God, I can't, I don't know how to do that. I'm not ready to do that, Lord. He goes, that's when you were ready.
I haven't seen that one yet. I need to go watch that. Ooh, that sounds good.
Because there was a humility about it. They were feeling called to do something that God was calling them to do. And what they're touching on is like those moments where you feel, I'm not equipped to do that thing. And what's that saying? God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Yeah.
Being in that moment, and how sometimes in our immaturity, because it's not always youth, it's immaturity.
Yeah.
I mean, we can be young and dumb, and we can be old and dumb. I mean, it's a spiritual maturity issue. there's no monopoly on immaturity. There's these moments where it's like, man, I could do this.
Yeah.
I could preach a sermon better than him.
Yeah.
I could lead a ministry better than him. And in those moments, I can imagine God's just like,
shut up.
Boy, you don't even, just like chuckle. Like you don't even know what you're saying.
Yeah, I saw a post today, some random guy talking about knowledge, and he was like, wisdom is not knowing. And how, I mean, that resonates. I mean, we all feel like that, right? We're like, oh, we got all this information, we got this revelation, we've got whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time. No. Have you applied it to your life? Because that's what he's trying to tell you is, I need you to act it out. That's wisdom.
That's the stuff we were talking about earlier. Sometimes God reveals something to you, and we're so excited about what's been revealed, we want to go share it with others, and God's like, live it out first. Mm-hmm. Put it into practice first. And you know what? Yes, share what I've revealed to you with others without saying anything.
Dude, yes. And that is the podcast for today. Bye. Oh, God. Yeah.
Like, we need to stop. I think I said this last time. We need to stop, or I think we should stop spending so much time telling people who we are and spend more time showing people who we are. Because I think we're real good at telling people who we are and what we stand for. But I think often the challenge is showing them. And that goes back to, Rodney and Carol and David. Like,
yeah,
those are folks that did it.
I was on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and someone had posted like they had this like secret sauce for HR. They're like, oh, if you take my class, or if you schedule a meeting with me, I'll give you all the insight, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there thinking about that. And I'm thinking about all the programs and processes that I put in startups in the past, or even with big companies too. And I was thinking about, okay, there were really great, really strategic, really thoughtful ideas and process. And then give it a day, and there's always more than one person that comes back and will be like, I feel fully disconnected from what you just put into place. Why did you put this into place? And then the battle starts on, oh shoot, what did I do? Like, okay, now I have to figure out how to connect these two things, and and you can be super thoughtful. You can put from the business world, put a bunch of process in place and make yourself feel real good because you came up with all these cool ideas and very, you're maneuvering in such a way that executive teams are like, oh yeah, let's go. But give it a month or so and you let that process play out. People are going to complain. There's going to be disconnect. And I, as I was thinking about that, I'm like, man, we as humans, we think we have it all together. Boy, do we not have anything together. If anything, we're always faking the funk.
Yes.
And that's why even the computer agrees. That's AI right there. That's ChatGPT responding. Yep, he's listening.
It feels like we go from extreme to extreme. We go from, I've got it all figured out, to, oh crap, what do I do? And it seems like we go from one extreme to another very quickly.
Very.
Like in an instant.
I got an action item then for people today. Shut up.
Go.
Shut up and do. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
Please don't be offended. I'll put it nicely. Stop talking and start living it out. And I'm speaking to myself.
That applies. It applies to all of us. And we've said that even about the podcast, sharing with people. Mm-hmm. Like we can talk about all these things, but if we don't have friends and a community, we're not part of a community that's going to hold us accountable.
Yeah.
Then we're just talking.
Yep. And we're always talking. Boom. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here. I've actually really enjoyed this conversation today. Wasn't expecting it, so.
It's good.
Well, we'll see you guys next week. Till next time.
Later.
Later.